Welcome in, gentlemen. Another great show, The Official. We had great feedback last week on our quarterback show and talking about the QB athlete score. We called it last week. We are now calling it the QB Star Index. We are now changing the name of this metric we've been talking about for a while, calling it the Star Index for the various positions. So go check out the QB Star Index show. It may be referred to as the athlete score, but we're changing that now. But this week, running back Star Index. And so, Matt, we talked about the model last week for quarterbacks. I don't think you need to go too deep into the model, but basically the inputs are size, speed, multi-sport capability, or how many sports they played in high school, and then agility, burst, height, I think does go in there. I might be missing one, Matt. But tell us a little bit about the weighting, because not only do those input go into the model, they're not all equal in terms of what the model's looking at.
Yeah, the only one you're missing was power score, and also arm length and hand size as well.
Okay.
In terms of weighting, that's kind of the purpose of the model. It decides how much each of these traits matter in order for predicting draft capital or fantasy points per game in the future. So in particular for running backs, speed, as you might have guessed, is the highest weight factor feature in that model for both the models, that is. It's actually the same top three for both models. It is speed, weight, and then multi-sport. Speed by far being the top, weight being the clear two, and then multi-sport being the clear three, and then everything else is kind of a bit even after that. It's a bit of a toss-up, but those three are the main three.
Yeah, and basically what I saw that you sent to us earlier today, speed most important for sure, and the highest weight, and then size or weight, multi-sport, similar, and then everything else is almost an afterthought. I mean, they're in there, but they're very, very low weight compared to those big three. And then also when you're talking about speed, just for our listeners, you think miles per hour, max miles per hour is the most important, but sometimes we don't have that, and so we'll go with a 40 time. But if you have to choose, you'd rather see max miles per hour, right?
Yeah, for me personally, just because it's football. You want to see them be fast on the football field instead of out of a 3-point stance.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, David. This idea of multi-sport, I think you guys all came up to it together. For some reason in my mind, I attribute that, paying attention to that a little bit to you. So it's 2 sports. That's multi-sport. Does that matter? Would you like to see 3? Would you like to see 4? And when we do this, is this like playing ever in their life? Or is it high school? Or do they have to be good at the sport or just have played it? What is some details around that?
I dig pretty far into their history usually. It kind of started as like mostly high school, but then I dug a little bit further, and I'll give them credit if they played middle school, stuff like that. Just really want to see a multi-sport talent. We kind of touched on this already about how you can't really it kind of accounts for the things you can't really put a number to. The subtle things that we talked about hand-eye coordination and the footwork and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It really started just like I was just digging into quarterbacks, like historically, and I was like, even guys like Tony Romo, who I didn't think were like especially athletic or whatever. I just like this dude was like, I don't know, his high school's all-time scorer in basketball, and he was like a 4-sport athlete. He was super good at base. Like they said, he could have gone pro. Probably not. People always say this stuff.
Yeah.
Like he could have gone pro in basketball. Definitely not, but he probably could have played collegiately. So it's just like these guys dominated in all sorts of sports at their high school. So yeah, typically the model seems to favor guys that play 3 or more sports. And like the more you do, the higher you go. I think it probably gives a little too much credit. Like if you play 5 sports, it probably inflates you a little bit. So that's something we'll probably work on and maybe tone that down a smidge. But it's definitely, it probably means you're pretty athletic though.
Yeah, and I think that's, some of this the multi-sport capabilities, and then the, obviously athletic metrics is why we were calling it like the athletic score for a while. We thought that maybe was a misnomer and people would get the wrong idea, at least for quarterbacks, which takes into account a few other things like ball velocity. But honestly, at the end of the day, this points to NFL potential, NFL stardom. And so it's the star index. That makes sense. Like, your higher number, more likely you're going to be an absolute star in college and the next level. So let's just go into it right here. We're going to add in the star index for current NFL players. The R indicates they're a current rookie. And I'll take away our little banner here so you can see the whole thing. But, no surprise here. In the NFL, the biggest, fastest beasts who have scored a lot of fantasy points over the years are at the top of the list. 99.6 for Derrick Henry. That means Derrick Henry's star index is the 99.6 percentile of Derrick Henry. No surprise there. Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley. Then we get to Will Shipley here at a 99th percentile score for his star index rating. I think this is a very interesting finding by our method here. He's behind Saquon Barkley. So the Eagles have probably the most athletic backfield or the highest star index backfield in the NFL right now. And Barkley, known to get injured. He's getting up there in age. I think Will Shipley is very interesting here. He was a day 3 pick. I think he was a 4th rounder. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
So the draft capital is not really there, but a supreme athlete here and a high star index, I think he's one to keep an eye on. Prior Strong came from FCS, South Dakota State, I believe. Tested very, very well. Unfortunately, kind of, I think, buried on the depth chart for the Browns. Then you got 2 absolute studs, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, and another interesting rookie. Trey Benson out of FSU had a really nice senior season. Got drafted in, I believe, the 3rd round to Arizona, sitting behind James Conner. Had a bad early preseason game. David, do you think Trey Benson, can he make some noise here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, this is a piece of the puzzle. At least he's very athletic, so that's good. I know the film grinders will obviously pick him apart a bit. He's more of a boom bust type running back, not like super consistent down and down, but I definitely think he'll get his opportunities in the NFL. And yeah, if he gets enough volume, I think he'll be pretty good for fantasy.
Yeah, I think he's real interesting, especially with this star index score. Joe Mixon is behind Benson. I mean, these are guys who are like bona fide RB1s in fantasy and in real life who have gotten the lion's share of their backfield for a long time. Nick Chubb comes in at 96.6. If you're listening on a podcast, you may miss some of these names, but we want you to watch it on YouTube. So go check out YouTube. You'll see the whole list here. But the top 15 running backs in the NFL, no one's lower than 95.6 percentile for the star index. So, you have to be really high to project as a RB1. One thing I did want to mention is that I think compared to the QB star index we did last week, the running back star index seems to have a wider spread. Like, you can go down into the 80s, 70s, even 60s for a couple of guys and see stud running backs. In the 80s, you've got Najee Harris, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson was 85.1. Devon Achane, who was one of the best, per rush guys ever in history last year, is 80.2. DeAndre Swift, 79. Dalvin Cook, stud for many years, 74.3. And then Alvin Kamara, 67. Josh Jacobs, 67.4. He was one of the better running backs. James Conner has had a great career, 62.6. So I'll throw it to you guys. Those guys aren't listed on the chart here for the highest, the top scores in the NFL. But what do you make of, it seems to me, do you agree that there's like a bigger spread on guys who have a lower score that seem to do okay in the NFL? And what do you think about that?
I'd have to look into the numbers themselves. I haven't really noticed that big of a difference in a spread per se. I think there's definitely lower QBs that have hit as well.
David, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I haven't looked. If that is the case, then I guess my reasoning would be like I've kind of talked about with quarterbacks. I just think that there's like a really select group that have the athletic profile to be successful in the NFL. I just think you got to be big and athletic and have a hose basically, and along with the mental side of it. With running back, I think obviously athleticism is a big part of it. There's a lot of other subtleties as well. There's just a lot that goes into it, having good feel and vision, and can you pass block, can you catch, all sorts of things. So maybe I don't know. This is me coming up with an answer on the spot. Maybe there's a wider skill set for running back. I'm not exactly sure, but I just think it's really hard to be successful as a quarterback, and you really just need the high end traits.
Yeah, well, I found it I felt like the spread was wider. I didn't do any analysis. It's just kind of eyeballing it. One thing I will say is that below 60 of star index score, it seemed like there was almost no bell cows whatsoever. The best guy I could find is like Jamal Williams, who had a day in the sun. Guys that people wanted to dream on who never seemed to really do it. Alexander Madison, Jalen Warren was getting a lot of hype. Now he's injured, but there was no guarantee Jalen Warren was going to be like the guy this year. There's just no names. There's no names I can look at and be like, oh yeah, he was an RB1 for 1 or more years in the NFL, under 60 of star index. So if you want to have a threshold, maybe that's it. But for the true superstars, it seems pretty clear, as close to 99 as you can get. So those are the numbers we're going to be looking at on the future shows in this week. We're going to look at the current college landscape, so who's coming up. Then we're going to look at some recruiting classes, both the incoming freshmen and next year's 2025 class. So stick with the official, and we will give you those names of who to circle on your draft sheets.